The first thing you'll want to do is prepare your paper mache strips. Here I'm ripping down newsprint into smaller chunks. I am trying to kind of give some variety in the sizes that I'm ripping, but I'm measuring with my hand here. You want it no bigger than 3 fingers wide and about a hand or a little more long. Here I'm opening up the paper mache glue. Now I'm ready to get started. First you're going to take a strip and you're going to dip it into the paper mache glue. Then you're going to run your fingers along both sides, almost like you're pinching it between 2 fingers and running your fingers in a downward motion until you get most of the glue that is super liquidy off. Now your paper should be a little bit wet, but you don't want it super gluey. I've laid it across my figure. And I'm tucking it into any little crevices that I have with my fingers. You want to lay that piece of paper as flat as possible and smooth it out over your form. You're also going to want to not overlap each layer. Now it's okay if it overlaps a little bit, but you don't want to end up layering on top of an already wet area, because if it gets too thick, it won't be able to dry and it will start to mold. It might be easier to start with your base first or any really flat areas so that you can understand how the method works before you start getting into the detailed areas. That's what I discovered when I made this video. It's really important that you scrape your fingers on the side of the paper mache container because that's going to get off most of the moisture from your hands. Here I'm just smoothing it out after I've laid it down. And if you lay it down and you realize it's kind of bumpy, just peel it up and lay it down again. Like I said before, super important to be scraping your fingers on the side of the bucket. As I work, I'm smoothing out areas that I notice are a little bit raised or bumpy. With a mostly dry finger. Now, like I said, this is a pretty messy process, so your fingers are going to feel a little bit slimy as you work. Look for the size of paper that you need based on what you are wrapping. If it's a small detailed area like a neck, like I did just a moment ago, I'm going to use a thinner piece of paper or a skinnier piece. I'm also going to try to lay my papers in the same direction so I can see where my layers are, but that's not going to work all the time based on what your form looks like. You probably will be only able to do 1 layer per day, just based on how much time we will have. You'll see here I'm really smoothing the paper as I place it onto the form to try to make it as smooth and flat as possible. Remember to run your fingers on both sides of the paper multiple times over the paper mache glue container to get off all the excess glue. It's almost like you're wrapping your form like as you would wrap, I don't know, like a sports bandage or a cast or something. So maybe almost think about it as like a mummy that you're wrapping up. You don't need to make those layers super thick. Remember, you have to let it dry, so do not overlap too much on your first layer. You don't need to cover up the bottom of your form wherever it sits on the table, because then it will stick when we turn it in. It's okay if you overlap a little bit like you just saw me do to the bottom. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say overlap. I just meant it hung over the edge a little bit. Keep in mind that this video is sped up 2 times, so it really makes sense to spend a lot of time getting off the extra glue. Here I'm trying to wrap the head with a really long piece of paper mache paper, and you'll realize that I am starting to realize that this piece is too long, and it's making it difficult for me to wrap the form to where it's totally smooth around these bumps and crevices. So if you're noticing that when you're using your paper mache, it's really easy at this point just to unwrap what you've just done, put that to the side. That can go in the trash. So now I'm going to problem solve, and I'm just going to rip a paper smaller so that it fits the head form a little bit more smoothly. If it's a little bit smaller, I have a little bit more control. So now that I've made it smaller, I'm going to use the extra little rip bits on my hands to cover the edge of the face or the chin area. So it is all right to have small pieces. Feel free to rip them up to make them work for what you need. All of our figures are different, so some people will need smaller pieces and some people will need larger pieces, not peaches. So that's why we rip them about 3 fingers wide and no longer than our hand or arm, so that everybody can adjust based off what they need. Here I'm wrapping this paper mache paper down or up the leg, so if you're going up or down an area, lay it at an angle so you don't end up wrapping around and around one area. That way you can go up or down in a direction, like a diagonal. And when you're ready to clean up, you have to scrape your messy fingers on the side of the container before you're able to go wash your hands. So really get off all the extra glue.